Hello everybody, it's a privilege for me to be here. I was dreaming about coming to Pakistan for so many years and finally I'm here in a university, so it's great emotion for me, seriously. Thank you for your time. So I will briefly present myself in order to introduce my speech, my reflection. I'm 33 years old. I graduated in law in Italy, and I had a thesis on gender discrimination in the workplace. Afterwards, I had a PhD in labor law and industrial relations, and I continued studying discrimination rights and human rights. So what I would like to share today is like the connection between what I studied from a discriminatory perspective and actually the mechanisms of violence who someone here already introduced very well, starting from Raphael to Declare. And this is because I think that what discrimination rights law teaches you is that actually discrimination and violence are spread in very different ways. So you can have all sorts of violence there. There are many grounds of discrimination, from belief, religion, sex, ethnicity, race, as somebody was also telling before. And it's very important to be aware of what violence is, what discrimination is, and definition could be given by legal base. So from the legislation, it's very important also to know it in a legal perspective in order to defeat it also as human beings. And I'm taking as an example what European law says about this. In Europe, what is said about discrimination is that it's a disadvantageous treatment of an individual based on a ground of prohibited law. And what's more important there is that discrimination is connected with comparability and generally occurs, the law says, when comparable situations are treated differently and different situations are treated in the same way. So there is a comparable mechanism that has to be taken into account, first of all. But more interesting is that European law divides discriminations in two kinds of. So the first one is direct discrimination. And the definition here is that it shall occur when one person is treated less favorably than another has been or would be treated in a comparable situation, or on any of the grounds of religion, belief, sex, disability, age, or sexual orientation. What I see here is that actually a person could be discriminated for any of these characteristics, and this is kind of due to the prejudice in a difference you're sharing out. It could be my sex, it could be my religion, it could be anything. But that the base there for violence and discrimination is basically prejudice, we would say. That's what law is underlining here. And European law always talks about a second kind of discrimination, which is indirect discrimination. And it says that it shall be taken to court when an apparently neutral provision, criterion, or practice would put in persons having a particular religion or belief, disability, sex, age, etc., at a particular disadvantage compared with other persons, unless this provision or criterion or practice is objectively justified by a legitimate aim. So this is more complex because it's not about the characteristic itself that puts you at discrimination, but it's more about the way that society is treating you and laws are treating you and practices are treating you. So somehow there are some occasions where we put laws in practice and we think they're equal for everybody, but they're actually not, because they're actually taking into consideration the majority of people or the mainstream, let's say, point of view. And that's where indirect discrimination occurs. So I think that everyone has had an experience in these two, let's say, fields. For example, indirect discrimination is very evident when we talk about the economic field, because of course we have a supremacy rule in this world. Someone talked about that before. And economy is based on a mechanism, a violent mechanism nowadays, who sees other people as means to reach something and not as an aim. So actually, we are treating people like they're objects, and that's why in economy, first of all, we have this supremacy rule that we are using people for our own interest. We had a very interesting conversation on this. And also from a broader social perspective, when it comes to diversity, if you do not include people, then our society kind of gets poorer in terms of resources and resilience. So this is also a social problem. It's not only an individual or a minority's problem. It's a problem which is affecting everybody. This is very important to be taken into account. And so I would say that I can talk about my experience and my country because this is the only things I know from a direct perspective. So for example, in Italy, what happened to me as a woman, so on a gender basis, from a perspective of direct discrimination, was that I felt discriminated in a direct way because I was a woman, because of my characteristic of being a woman, while walking on the streets. And men catcalling at me. That's something that I felt like discrimination and direct discrimination, because this wouldn't happen to a man walking on the street. So that is just because I'm a woman. And an example for me of indirect discrimination instead was on the workplace. And this actually was on two grounds, not only the gender one, but also the age one. Because as you could have heard, discrimination also happens on the basis of age. So this is intersectional discrimination, because it's not only about my gender, it's also about my age. I'm a young woman, and in the labor market in Italy, this is not a good thing, because actually your career path is more difficult, because there are some neutral practices of hiring people which should take into account your competence, but because of some prejudice, for example, that women will get pregnant, so they won't be able to work in a continuous way, let's say, then they will tend to hire more men. And apparently, they're just searching for the person doing the job, but then this apparently neutral provision or practice or criterion they're using is affecting more women than men. So this is some example, and also about the age. As a young person, you're seen as less expert compared to people who are older, but maybe studied less in that field you're operating in. So you see, there are many ways that discriminations, I think everybody can think about their personal experience here in very different fields and could take their experience as well. I just talk about mine because it's the easiest thing I can do. But I think this is very, very interesting, because as a humanist, part of the humanist movement, I think this really goes deeper into the roots of violence, because as said, here there are two main things: prejudice for direct discrimination, and let's say social constructions which are affecting a group of minorities or groups of people who are not in the mainstream narrative, let's say, and who gain less power. So these are very, very common mechanism in every violence. And as also Claire was saying, we have to understand how violence starts within us to defeat it on a personal and social basis. So I would like to briefly read a part of a speech from the humanist founder, the founder of the humanist movement, who is CILO. His name is Mario Rodriguez Cobos. He was born in Argentina, and he's basically talking about the golden rule. We have this thing which is called the golden rule, which says that to be nonviolent, you should treat others as you would like to be treated. So that's the clue thing, in my opinion. You treat others as an aim and not as a means, and this leads you to be a non-violent person, because other people are not something different than yourself. And I think, the guy there was talking about this, and I immediately thought about that, because of course you can react with violence, but then you're actually hurting yourself. It's not that you're hurting others. They also made social experiments about this. When people are talking about something that they perceived as discrimination or violence, they were talking, for example, about the feelings they were experimenting, and the feelings were delusion, sadness, anger, and also I think that what's more interesting is that the same people were telling that these were exactly the same feelings they were experimenting when they were hurting other people. There was no difference. I feel sad, I feel angry, I feel disappointed, I feel delusional when I treat others as such as when the others are treating me in that way. So we are the same thing. That's the main part. And I will just conclude briefly reading this paragraph. I think it's very inspiring, so I would like to share it with you. Insofar as one is anesthetized against perceiving the temporal horizon of the other will have no meaning beyond or for me. The nature of the other person will be a for me. But when I constitute that the other person as a for me, I constitute and alienate myself in my own for myself. I say I am for me, and in saying that, I close my horizon of transformation. People who make others into things make themselves into things too, thereby closing off their own horizons. Insofar as I do not experience the other except as a for me, my vital activity will not humanize the world. The other must be an inner register for me, a warm sensation of an open future that does not end in the objectifying no meaning of death. To feel that which is human in the other is to feel the life of the other in a beautiful, multicolored rainbow that moves farther and farther away the more I try to stop, to size, to capture its expression. You grow farther away, and I take comfort if I have helped you to break your chains, to overcome your pain and suffering. And if you accompany me, it is because, in a free act, you constitute yourself as a human being, and not simply because you were born human. I sense in you the liberty and the possibility of your constituting yourself as a human being, and in you my acts find the liberty of which they aim. And so, not even your death can halt the actions you set in motion, because you are in essence time and liberty. What I love in the human being, then, is its growing humanization. And in these times of crisis, reification, and dehumanization, I love the possibility of the human being's future vindication. So this is the speech. And just to conclude, I would say that it's really important to take this golden rule into mind and to understand violence in every aspect, because I think that peace won't be peace until it will be peace for everybody, within us and outside.
बहुत शुक्रिया, ख़ास तौर पे यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ मैनेजमेंट टेक्नोलॉजी का कि उन्होंने हमें मौका दिया कि हम लोग यहाँ पर अपना जो मिशन है या मकसद है उसके बारे में आप लोगों से बता सकें। ये जो थर्ड मार्च फॉर पीस एंड नॉन वायलेंस है, इसके बारे में मैं मुख्तसर आपको बताऊंगा। बुनियादी तौर पे आप जानते हैं कि दुनिया में जंगें, तनाज़ात और तशद्दुद में मुसलसल इजाफा हो रहा है, और जितनी बड़ी बड़ी ताकतें हैं वो अपने असले के ज़ोर पे, अपनी ताकत के ज़ोर पे छोटी छोटी जो रियासतें हैं या कमज़ोर रियासतें हैं उन पर मुसलसल अपनी जारहाना इक़दाम करते जा रहे हैं। अब मसला ये है कि उसके सामने जो दूसरी ताकतें हैं उनके पास इतनी आवाज़ नहीं है कि वो इसको रोक सकें। अब उसके लिए एक फोरम है अक़वाम मुत्तहिदा, और अक़वाम मुत्तहिदा के बारे में आप खुद जानते हैं कि वो कितना उसके सामने बेबस है। अब दुनिया में बहुत सारे शहरी या सिटीजन्स वो भी ये फैसला कर रहे हैं कि हमें अपनी आवाज़ उठानी चाहिए। इस वक्त लैटिन अमेरिका में आपने सुना होगा एक नाम मुल्क का, छोटा सा मुल्क है कोस्टा रिका। तो कोस्टा रिका में एक यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ पीस है, वहाँ से ये मार्च शुरू हुआ है 1 अक्टूबर को, और ये तकरीबन 85 मुल्कों में इसी किस्म के सेमिनार, कॉन्फ्रेंसेस, वॉक्स, मुख्तलिफ किस्म की एक्टिविटीज़ हैं। और उसका सबसे बड़ा मकसद ये है ताकि दुनिया में ये पैगाम दिया जाए कि सिर्फ तनाज़ात और वॉर्स, इसको ख़त्म करने का तरीका ये सिर्फ वेपन्स ये नहीं है, बल्कि इसको हम पुरअमन तरीके से भी हल कर सकते हैं। اب یہ جو آئیڈیا تھرڈ یہ جو مارچ فار پیس اینڈ نان وائلنس ہے، اس کے ہمارے پاس جنہوں نے اوریجنیٹ کیا 2007 میں، وہ رافیل ہمارے پاس موجود ہے. رافیل خود بھی اپنے بارے میں بتا سکتے ہیں، مگر میں صرف آپ کو ایک اس کا چھوٹا سا انٹروڈکشن ہی بتانا چاہتا ہوں کہ آپ نے سنا ہوگا کہ نوبل پرائز جو دیتے ہیں دنیا میں، یہ نوبل پرائز دینے والی جو کمیٹی ہے اس کے ممبر ہیں جو دنیا میں نوبل پرائز دیتے ہیں. تو آپ یہ سوچیں کہ ہمارے لیے کتنی بڑی اعزاز کی بات ہے کہ اس وقت آپ کی یونیورسٹی میں ایک اسپین سے رافیل ہیں، انٹونیو جو انگلینڈ سے ہیں، فیڈریکا جو ہے وہ اٹلی سے ہیں، تلسی جو ہے وہ نیپال سے ہیں، اور ڈیکلیئر ابھی آئے نہیں، وہ آسٹریلیا سے ہیں. یہ 5 مختلف خطوں اور ملکوں کے لوگ پاکستان میں آئے ہیں، اور جب یہ واپس جائیں گے تو آپ جانتے ہیں پاکستان کا جو نیگیٹو امیج ہے اس کو پازیٹیو بلڈ کرنے میں مدد دیتے ہیں. کیونکہ باہر اگر آپ جائیں تو آپ کو اندازہ ہوتا ہے کہ پاکستان کے بارے میں لوگ ایک مختلف قسم کی تصویر جو ہے وہ پینٹ کرتے ہیں جو ایک نیگیٹو ہوتی ہے کہ یہاں پر دہشت گردی بہت زیادہ ہوتی ہے، عورتیں آزاد نہیں ہیں، لوگ جو ہے آپس میں لڑتے رہتے ہیں، جھگڑتے رہتے ہیں. تو ہم نے یہ ڈیسائیڈ کیا کہ جب لوگ باہر کے جو ایمبیسڈر پاکستان میں آئیں، مین سٹریم یونیورسٹیوں سے، اسٹوڈنٹ سے، لوگوں سے ملیں، تو ایک ایسا پازیٹیو امیج لے کے جاتے ہیں کہ ہمارا ملک جو ہے وہ ایک زبردست قسم کا اس کا اپنا امپریشن آتا ہے. اور یہ بڑی کامیابی کی بات ہے پاکستان میں کہ ہمارا یہ تجربہ رہا ہے کہ جتنے بھی انٹرنیشنل ڈیلیگیٹس پاکستان میں جب آتے ہیں، لوگوں سے ملتے ہیں اور آپ سے ملیں گے، واپس جائیں گے تو ان کا ٹوٹل انڈرسٹینڈنگ اور سمجھ بوجھ چینج ہو جاتی ہے. یہ 5 لوگ اس سے پہلے پاکستان میں نہیں آئے سوائے ڈکلیئر کے، لیکن ڈکلیئر جو ہے وہ صرف سندھ میں آئے، لاہور میں کوئی نہیں آیا. تو لاہور کی ایک اپنی تاریخی اہمیت ہے اور تاریخی حیثیت ہے. تو 2 دن کے لیے یہ آئے، اور 2 دنوں میں آج تقریباً ان کا لاسٹ ڈے ہے. اس کے بعد ایک یونیورسٹی ہے، اس کے بعد ان کا یہ یہاں پر جنور جو ہے یا یہ جو ان کا دورہ ہے وہ تقریباً مکمل ہو جائے گا. تو ہمارا جو مقصد ہے یہاں پر آنے کا وہ یہ ہے کہ دنیا میں سب سے زیادہ اس وقت یونیورسٹیز کے اسٹوڈنٹس جنگوں کے خلاف سب سے زیادہ ایکٹیو رول ادا کر رہے ہیں. تو آپ لوگوں سے ملنے کا بھی مقصد یہ ہے کہ زیادہ تر جو پاکستان میں یونیورسٹی اسٹوڈنٹس ہیں وہ اپنی آواز بلڈ کر کے یہ جو نان وائلنس اور جنگوں کو روکنے کا ایک کام ہے اس میں اہم رول ادا کر سکیں. بہت شکریہ. میرا خیال ہے کہ ہمارے پاس ٹائم اتنا زیادہ نہیں ہے. ہمارے ڈسٹنگوش گیسٹ جو ہیں اس کے بارے میں بات کریں گے. اس کے بعد اگر آپ کا کوئی سوال ہو تو وہ آپ ہم سے پوچھ سکتے ہیں. بہت شکریہ. تھینک یو.
Good afternoon, everybody. I apologize for coming late, but I was taken to 2 other universities without my knowledge. I didn't know where to go, so finally we got here. So I apologize for that, but it was out of my control entirely and completely. There's not much I have to say. I believe that the topic of peace and nonviolence is a sensitive one today because I believe it's misinterpreted. The term is misinterpreted because many people think that violence is something that is got to do somewhere outside you, right? And I don't agree with that view. I think violence and the understanding of violence begin with me. So what I'm talking about, what I'm saying here is not any theory. It's not anything that I read in books. It's something that I understood by having some tools and understanding about myself and the way violence operates. So, for example, to what extent do I produce violence myself? To what extent do I do that? Do I discriminate my fellow classmates? Huh? Do I objectivize a woman, for example? Do I do that? Do I discriminate somebody because it has a different religion or a different race? No? So these questions and the concept of nonviolence begin with me. So this is the thing when we speak about nonviolence, there is a lot of theories out there, a lot of ways of interpreting this, but I believe that it has two dimensions, a personal dimension and social dimension. So when I speak about violence in relation to me, I speak about my own take on it. So how could I, for example, um, be a better non-violent human being, right? Now, the other question that I have asked myself, how do, when violence is exercises against me, for example, how do I respond to it? How do I respond to that violence? Do I respond with violence in the same way? Yes. I am absolutely convinced entirely that violence is a chain. You will produce violence and react with violence. You produce your violence and react with violence until one of the parties disappears or no, and we change nothing. So two things is my take on my view. One, peace and non-violence has a personal dimension. Each one of us has to take peace and courage to others, but we need to understand what is that dimension. What is that dimension in ourselves? Secondly, how do I respond to violence? How do I respond to violence is part of that. And I believe that in no way possible responding to violence will do anything good other than share us the you there is altogether. We come with human beings. I connect with you. I see you here. I see your eyes. I see your intentions. I see your humanity. And that is the thing that relates uh, the world march, me coming to Pakistan and being here talking to you. Right? That's the thing. So it's very important for me to share this feeling. So it's more like a testimony rather than a lecture or anything because I don't have the authority to do that, but I have the authority to speak about my own techniques. That's all. That's all I need to say. Thank you.